Hello friends, welcome. Here we are discussing real stories told by real people. Today we have a story about a man whose wife tried to destroy his friendship with his best friend in the lowest way. Let's see what happens. My name is Nick. I am 35 years old. I am married to a beautiful woman named Alice. We have two wonderful children. We live in the suburbs of Chicago. Our life seemed perfect. But this story is not about me and my wife. It's about my best friend and his wife, who turned our lives around. My friend's name is Jake. He is also 35 years old. We met in college and have been by each other's side ever since. Jake is tall and slender, with brown hair and piercing blue eyes. He is a software engineer, an intelligent and responsive person. We shared everything: joys, problems, secrets. When Jake met Emily, everything changed. Emily is a year younger than Jake. She was the exact opposite of my Alice. Bright, manipulative, hungry for attention. Emily is short, with long red hair and green eyes. She has always been able to attract attention to herself. Jake and Emily started dating 5 years ago. Their relationship was unstable. They often broke up and got back together. Emily cheated on him repeatedly, but she always managed to convince Jake that he was to blame for her displeasure. "Nick, I do not know what to do," Jake said when they broke up once again. We were sitting in our favorite cafe having a cup of coffee. "You deserve better, Jake," I replied. "You don't have to put up with her cheating." Jake sighed, running his hand through his hair. "I know, but she's like that. She knows how to convince that it's my fault." When Jake finally married Emily, I hoped things would change. But last month, Jake found out that Emily was cheating on him again. She was dating a colleague. Jake was terrified. "I can't believe she did it again," Jake said, sitting in our kitchen. He looked broken. His eyes were red from crying. "You did everything right," my wife Alice reassured him. She was always wise and kind. "You're strong, Jake." Alice is tall and slender, with short blonde hair and kind brown eyes. She worked as a teacher and always knew how to support me and our friends. Our children adored her, and I was happy that she was my wife. Jake stayed with us for a few weeks after he kicked Emily out. We supported him as much as we could. Alice was cooking his favorite dishes, and I was trying to distract him by talking about technology and our shared hobbies. "Thank you for being there," Jake said one evening, sitting on the couch in our living room. "I do not know what I would do without you." "We will always be there, Jake," I replied, patting him on the shoulder. "You're like a brother to us." But everything changed in one day. The day Emily decided to strike her most insidious blow. It's been a few weeks since Jake kicked Emily out. He finally decided to file for divorce. That Saturday, Emily came to pick up her things with her father. I advised Jake to leave while she was there, but he decided to stay to make sure she didn't take anything extra. I knew it was a bad idea, but Jake was adamant. When Emily showed up, I was at home with my family. Alice and I were doing the usual things. The children were playing in the garden. Our house is bright and cozy, with large windows and wooden floors. There has always been an atmosphere of comfort and safety here. But that day everything changed. "Emily's here," Jake said on the phone. His voice sounded strained. "She's with her father." They started to pack her things. "Jake, just leave," I urged him. "It's not worth staying there." "No, Nick, I have to make sure she doesn't take anything of mine," he replied firmly. Shortly after, the doorbell rang. I opened it and Jake was standing in front of me. He looked upset and worried. "What happened?" I asked, letting him in. She said that we had an affair," Jake said, trying not to look me in the eye. "What? This is complete nonsense," I exclaimed. Alice, hearing this, came up to us. "What's going on? What is it?" she asked, looking at both of us. "Emily said we were having an affair," Jake repeated, his voice shaking with rage. Alice looked at me with disbelief. "Is it true?" "What is it?" she asked softly. "Of course not," I exclaimed. "I've never been alone with her. It's just another lie of hers." Jake shook his head. "She said you were doing it in my bedroom." Alice gasped and put her hand to her mouth. "It's terrible," she said. "Why is she doing this?" "She wants to destroy me," Jake said. "She knows you're my best friend, Nick. She wants to break us up." I looked at Alice. "You have to believe me." Alice nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. "I believe you," she said, but her voice was uncertain. Jake sighed again. "I do not know what to do," he said, sitting down on the sofa. "You have to understand that she's lying," I replied. "We have to prove it somehow." Alice went over to Jake and hugged him. "We'll find a way," she said. "We're with you, Jake." The three of us were sitting in the living room, trying to figure out how to proceed. The situation was tense. My mind raced, trying to find a way out. Emily destroyed everything we've been building for years. But I knew one thing. We had to fight for the truth. Alice was holding my hand. Her touch was soothing. "We can do this together," she whispered. Jake raised his head and looked at us. "Thank you for being there," he said softly. "I do not know what I would do without you." I nodded. "We'll figure it out," I said confidently. "We won't let her ruin our lives." We kept talking, trying to find a plan. At that moment, I realized that our world would never be the same again. But we were determined to fight. And then our struggle for the truth began. That evening, we decided that we needed to act. Alice offered to record all our conversations with Jake and Emily to gather evidence. We also agreed that we would try not to get into conflicts and stay together. "The first thing to do is call a lawyer," Alice said as Jake and I sat in the kitchen. "Nick, do you have any contacts?" "Yes, I know a good lawyer. I'll call him in the morning," I replied. "We need to be prepared for anything." The next morning, I contacted a lawyer. His name was Mark Stevens, an experienced family affairs specialist. I explained the situation to him, and he agreed to meet with us. "Let's meet at my office tomorrow," Mark said over the phone. "We will discuss your plan of action." I thanked him and hung up. "We're meeting with a lawyer tomorrow," I informed Jake and Alice. "Great," Jake replied. "I hope he helps us." The next day, we went to Mark's office. It was located in the center of the city, in a small but cozy building. Mark met us in his office. He was a short man in his 40s, with neatly trimmed gray hair and piercing eyes. "Tell me everything in detail," he asked when we sat down. I started telling him how it all happened. Jake and Alice complimented my words by describing their emotions and experiences. Mark listened intently, taking notes. "Emily knows Jake trusts her," I said. "She's using this to manipulate him." "We can prove it's a lie," Alice added. "We've always stuck together, and we have witnesses." Mark nodded. "This is a good argument. But we need more evidence. I recommend that you collect all possible recordings of conversations with Emily and Jake." "We have already started doing this," I replied. "We have several recordings where she contradicts herself." "Great," Mark said. "We will use this in court. In addition, I advise you to avoid any conflicts with Emily. Let all contacts go through me." We agreed with his suggestions. When I returned home in the evening, I felt a little calmer. We knew that there was a long and difficult road ahead, but we had a plan. Jake stayed with us for dinner. We were sitting at the table, talking and trying to distract ourselves from unpleasant thoughts. Alice served her signature dish, baked chicken with vegetables. "Thank you for everything," Jake said, putting down his fork. "I do not know how I would have coped without your support." "You're like a brother to us," I replied. "We can do this together." Alice nodded. "The main thing is not to give up. We'll find a way to prove the truth." We kept talking, making plans for the future. At that moment, I realized how important our relationship and each other's support are. We were a team ready to fight for truth and justice. The following days were filled with meetings with a lawyer, collecting evidence and talking with friends. We found out which of them is ready to support us and who believes in Emily's lies. It was a difficult time, but we didn't give up. One evening, when the children were already asleep, Alice came up to me and hugged me. "We'll manage," she said, looking into my eyes. "I believe in us." I hugged her back tightly. "Thank you for being here," I whispered. Our world had changed, but we were ready to fight. Together, we will overcome all difficulties and prove the truth. And this was only the first step on the path to justice. Events unfolded rapidly. After meeting with attorney Mark Stevens, we realized that the case would not be easy. We started collecting evidence, recording conversations, and making a plan of action. One morning, while I was drinking coffee in the kitchen, the phone rang. It was Mark. "Nick, we need to meet. I have important information," he said. "When?" I asked. "This afternoon, at 3 o'clock, Mark replied. Agreed and hung up the phone. Alice, who was sitting next to me, looked at me anxiously. "Has something happened?" "What is it?" she asked. "Mark wants to meet at 3 today. He has important information," I explained. Alice nodded. "We'll manage," she said softly, squeezing my hand. We met with Mark at his office. He got straight to the point. "I received a letter from Emily's lawyer," he began. "They claim that they have witnesses who confirm her words." Jake, who was with us, turned pale. "Who are these witnesses?" he asked. "These are two of her colleagues. But we have a trump card," Mark continued. "Your recording of the conversation where Emily confesses to lying will be decisive evidence." I breathed a sigh of relief. "We have to use this," I said. "Of course," Mark nodded. "But first we need to try to settle the case peacefully. I will prepare a letter offering a confession and an apology." We agreed to his plan. That evening, when I got home, I told Alice about the meeting. "We have a chance," she said. "The main thing is not to give up." The next day, Mark sent an email to Emily's lawyer. We were waiting for their response with impatience. During this time, we continued to collect evidence and support Jake. One evening, Jake called me. "Nick, I can't live like this anymore," he said. "This situation is destroying me." "Hold on, friend," I replied. "We're almost there." Several days passed, and finally, a response came from Emily's lawyer. They agreed to a meeting to discuss the terms of the settlement. Mark has prepared us for this meeting. He was sure that we had strong arguments. On the day of the meeting, we went to Mark's office. Emily and her lawyer met us in the waiting room. She looked confident, but there was tension in her eyes. Mark started the conversation. "We are here to resolve the issue peacefully. We have evidence that Emily's accusations are false." Emily's lawyer raised an eyebrow skeptically. Mark turned on the recording of the conversation. There was silence in the room when we heard Emily's voice confessing to a lie. The lawyer looked puzzled. "This is crucial evidence," Mark said. "We are ready for trial if necessary." Emily lowered her head. The lawyer spoke to her quietly, then turned to us. "We are ready to discuss the terms of the settlement," he said. "What do you suggest?" Mark outlined our demands: an official admission of guilt, an apology to Jake and me, as well as compensation for moral damage. Emily sighed. "I agree," she said softly. "I'm sorry for everything I've done." At that moment, I felt that we had taken the first step towards restoring justice. We left Mark's office feeling relieved. We knew there was still a lot of work ahead, but this day was an important milestone on the way to the truth. After the settlement with Emily, our lives began to gradually return to normal. Alice and I felt calm and confident again. We knew there was still a lot to do, but the first step had been taken. One morning, as we were sitting at breakfast, Alice looked at me and quietly said, "Nick, I'm proud of you." I smiled back at her. "Thank you, dear. I couldn't have done it without your support." Our children, Tom and Lily, chatted cheerfully about their plans for the day. Their joy and carelessness gave us the strength to move on. Jake was starting to come to his senses too. He decided to stay with us for a few more weeks to finally recover. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, the three of us were sitting in the living room and discussing our next steps. "I plan to get back to work next week," Jake said. "I need to take my mind off and focus on something useful." "That's a good idea," Alice replied. "Work will help you deal with stress." Jake nodded. "Thank you both. You saved me in the most difficult moment." The next morning, we received a letter from Mark's lawyer. He informed us that Emily had signed all the necessary documents and officially apologized to us. It was a great victory for all of us. "Now we can move on," I said, showing Alice the letter. "Yes, Nick," she agreed. "We deserved it." Meanwhile, Jake began to rebuild his relationship with his friends. He called several of our mutual friends and explained the whole situation. "I was wrong," he said. "Forgive me for believing a lie." Most of our friends supported Jake. They understood that he was the victim of Emily's manipulation. It helped him feel better and get back to a normal life. Alice and I also had several meetings with friends to clarify the situation. We told them about Emily's lies and showed them the evidence. "I always knew you couldn't do that," said one of our friends, John. "You're a decent person, Nick." "Thank you, John," I replied. It was a difficult time, but we got through it. Alice and I decided to have a little dinner for our closest friends. It was our way of thanking them for their support and showing that we appreciate their friendship. There was a warm and friendly atmosphere at the dinner. We laughed, shared memories, and made plans for the future. It was an important moment for all of us. We realized that our friendship had become even stronger after the trials we had endured. At the end of the evening, Jake raised a toast. "I want to thank you all," he began. "Nick, Alice, you are my heroes. I will never forget what you have done for me. And thanks to all our friends for their support. We've been through this together." Everyone raised their glasses and drank together. It was a symbolic moment that marked the end of a difficult period in our lives and the beginning of a new, brighter stage. The next day, Jake started packing his things. He decided it was time to return to his apartment and start a new life. "Are you sure you're ready?" I asked him, helping him pack his things. "Yes, Nick," Jake replied confidently. "I'm ready. You gave me strength and faith in myself." We hugged, and Jake left, promising to visit us often. We knew he could do it, and we were happy for him. Alice came up to me and hugged me. "We did it," she said softly. "Yes, we did it," I agreed, hugging her back. Our lives returned to normal, and we were ready for new challenges. The main thing was that we were together, and nothing could separate us. So we have come to the end of this story. Please write your opinion in the comments. We will be interested to know it. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss new, even more exciting stories. We wish you good luck.